Deanna's croissants, oh my god. I bet you don't want to know what she puts in it. It's unbelievable. I'd rather not say anything.
Her space? Everything about it does not seem right, looks too suspicious to ignore, don't you think?
It is a Wednesday morning on Main Street in Millfield, Ohio. A woman in a yellow coat is sitting on the curb outside a bakery, phone pressed to her ear, one hand on her stomach. A man is pacing the sidewalk in front of the same bakery door saying loudly into his phone, "No. Do not go there. I'm serious. Do not." Two teenagers on bikes have stopped to watch. Someone has taped a piece of notebook paper to the door that says, in big red marker, "Do not eat here." The bakery is called Sweet Rival. 30 feet to the left, through a window with Sugar Crown written in gold letters, a woman in a white apron is standing with her arms crossed, watching all of it like someone watching a storm they did not start. Her name is Diana Wells. She watches for about 4 seconds. Then she turns back to her counter. She has croissants to finish. Morning. Diana Wells's bakery almost burned to the ground. She was standing 30 feet away. And she never touched a single match. Now, before we tell you what happened to that bakery next door, and trust me, you need to know what happened, let's talk about Diana Wells for a second. Because you cannot understand this story without understanding her first. And here is the first question this story is going to ask you. Have you ever watched someone build something beautiful, slowly, quietly, with their own two hands, and then watched someone else decide that the most logical response to that beauty was to destroy it? If you have, stay with us. Because Diana's story is going to feel very familiar. And if you think you already know how this ends, you don't. Because what Renee Carson did next, and what happened to her because of it, is not something anyone in Millfield, Ohio saw coming. Including Renee herself. Diana Wells has been the first person awake in Millfield for 11 years. Every single morning, Monday through Saturday, she is in that bakery at 4 a.m. Not 4:15. Not 4:05. 4 o'clock. Her alarm goes off and she does not hit snooze because she told herself 11 years ago that the day she started hitting snooze was the day Sugar Crown started dying. She opens the back door with the same key her locksmith gave her the day she signed the lease. She ties her apron, the white one with the coffee stain near the left pocket that she has never been able to get out and stop trying. She washes her hands. She turns on the oven. And then she does the thing her father taught her. She stands at the counter for 60 seconds with her hands flat on the cold steel and she breathes. Her father, Frank Wells, called it, greeting the kitchen. He said every kitchen has a spirit and if you barge in like you own the place instead of greeting it properly, the food will taste like your arrogance. Diana thought he was being poetic when she was young. Now she is 47 years old and she does it every single morning without exception. Bake with a clean heart, Frank used to say, standing beside her at his kitchen counter in their house on Cedar Lane. The dough always knows. Diana did not come from money. She opened Sugar Crown with $4,200, $2,800 from savings and $1,400 she borrowed from her mother, who was herself working 2 jobs at the time and handed over the money without being asked twice. The first oven Diana bought was second-hand and the temperature dial was 30 degrees off. She learned to compensate. You either learn to compensate or you fail. Diana has never been interested in failing. She built a customer base the only way you can build one in a small town. One person at a time. One croissant at a time. One Saturday morning at a time. On the shelf behind her counter, between a jar of Maldon salt and a small plant nobody has ever been able to name, there is a water-stained recipe binder held together with a rubber band. Customers have asked about it. Diana always smiles and says, "That's just my notes." It is not just her notes. By year 3, Sugar Crown had a wait list for Saturday orders. By year 5, a food blogger from Columbus drove down and wrote 4 paragraphs about the brown butter croissants that ended with the sentence, "I have eaten croissants in Paris." I am telling you, drive to Millfield. The line on Saturday morning starts forming at 6:45 a.m. The bakery opens at 8. Nobody in Millfield could explain exactly why Diana's croissants tasted the way they did. People tried. They talked about the butter. They talked about the lamination. They talked about the proofing time. But none of that explained it completely. And that unexplainable quality, that thing nobody could put a name on, was exactly what drove Renee Carson absolutely out of her mind. Let me tell you what Sugar Crown looks like from the inside so you understand what Diana had built. The walls are pale yellow, the color her mother called early morning. There are 6 small tables with mismatched chairs that Diana collected over years from yard sales and estate auctions because she wanted the place to feel like somewhere people actually lived. The display case runs the full length of the front counter, croissants on the left, seasonal pastries in the middle, the rotating daily special on the right. Every item has a small handwritten card with its name. Diana knows every regular customer's usual order. Not from a system. From memory. Tom Bradshaw, large coffee, 1 plain croissant, extra butter on the side. Sits by the window. Comes in every Tuesday and Thursday. Has been coming for 9 years. Melissa Park, almond croissant, no coffee, always asks if there are any extras she can take home for her daughter. There are always extras for Melissa. The Kowalski brothers, they come together every Saturday, order 6 croissants between them, and argue loudly and affectionately about literally everything while Diana pretends not to listen and laughs anyway. Diana does not get rich from Sugar Crown. She gets comfortable. She pays her mortgage, she pays her one employee, a 22-year-old named Tyler who she is teaching to bake because he reminds her of herself at that age, and she has enough left over to put something small away each month. She is not building an empire. She is building a life. There is a difference and Diana knows it and is at peace with it. She calls her mother every Sunday evening. Sometimes she opens the recipe binder and reads her father's handwriting just to feel close to him. Some nights she sits at one of her mismatched chairs after the bakery closes and drinks a cup of tea in the empty room and thinks about how close she came to never doing this at all. How she almost took the safe job. How she almost didn't sign the lease. How her father looked at her the day she told him she was going to open her own place and said, without hesitating even for a second, "I know. I've been waiting for you to figure that out." He died 14 months later. He never saw the Columbus food blogger. He never saw the Saturday line. But Diana thinks he would not have been surprised by any of it. Renee Carson moved to Millfield 3 years ago. She was Diana's neighbor at church, the kind of neighbor who always sat close enough to comment on everything but far enough to seem like she wasn't. Renee was not a baker. But Renee was ambitious. She saw things and she wanted them. Not in the careful patient way Diana wanted things but in the fast urgent way of someone who feels they have already waited too long. She approached Diana after church one Sunday in October. "Diana, I've been thinking," Renee said. She had a specific way of starting sentences with "I've been thinking" that meant she had already decided. "What if we went into business together? I have capital. You have the product. We could expand. Second location. Maybe catering." Diana listened politely. She asked one question, "Would I still run the kitchen my way?" Renee smiled. "Of course. With some adjustments." Diana said, "Thank you, Renee. I'm going to say no." Renee's smile stayed exactly where it was. "Think about it," she said. "There's no rush." But Diana had already thought about it. She had thought about it in the 4 seconds between Renee's proposal and her answer. The answer was no. It was always going to be no. Because Diana knew something about, with some adjustments, that Renee did not understand, which was that Diana's bakery was not a formula. It was a feeling. And feelings do not survive adjustments. 3 weeks later, the empty space directly next door to Sugar Crown, the one that had been a cell phone repair shop, had a new sign in the window. "Sweet Rival Bakery. Coming soon." Tom Bradshaw, who had been sitting by the window on a Tuesday morning when the sign went up, said later that he watched Diana see it for the first time. She was standing behind her counter. She read the sign. She stood there for about 5 seconds. Then she went back to what she was doing. She never said a word about it to any of her customers. Not one word. But here is the question you need to sit with: if Renee was setting up directly next door, with more capital, with a bigger space, with nothing to lose, why wasn't Diana scared? What did Diana know that Renee didn't? Stay with us. Because the answer to that question is the whole story. Sweet Rival opened on a Friday morning in November. Renee had done everything right, at least from the outside. She had hired a designer. The space looked polished: exposed brick, chalkboard menus, pendant lighting. She had a soft opening with samples. She had a social media account with 400 followers before she served a single customer. She sold croissants. Brown butter croissants. The same shape as Diana's. The same garnish. The same positioning in the display case. And they tasted fine. They tasted like croissants. They were technically correct. They had the right layers, the right color, the right flake when you broke them open. But something was missing. That thing nobody could name. That thing people drove from 2 counties over for. It was not there. The first week, Sweet Rival was full. Curiosity does that. People came to look. Some of them bought. Some of them went next door and bought from Diana too and stood on the sidewalk eating both and nodding slowly. By the 3rd week, the lines at Sugar Crown were unchanged. The line at Sweet Rival was shorter every day. Renee stood in her beautiful polished bakery and watched people walk past her door and into Diana's. And something began to change in her. Now here is something I want to ask you directly. Have you ever worked just as hard as someone else, done everything right, checked every box, followed every step, and still watched someone else's version of the same thing just work in a way yours didn't? And you couldn't explain why. And nobody could explain why. And the not knowing was almost worse than the failing itself. That is where Renee Carson was sitting. And that is a dangerous place for a certain kind of person to sit for too long. Renee's first move was her mouth. She started talking. At the gym. At church. At the school pickup line where she knew Diana's customers gathered. Small things first. Almost throwaway. I heard Sugar Crown uses artificial flavoring in the croissants. Not real butter. I don't know, I'm just saying what I heard. Has anyone actually looked into where Diana sources her ingredients? I'm not saying anything, I'm just asking. I love Diana, she's great, I just personally prefer to know exactly what's going in my food. That's all. These were not accusations. They were seeds. Planted in casual conversation. Dressed as concern. Renee had a specific gift for making poison sound like caring. And here is the thing I need you to really think about, because I know some of you have been in this exact situation. Have you ever had someone spread a rumor about you that was completely false, but because it was small and vague and dressed up as a question, you couldn't even directly refute it? You can't fight a maybe. You can't punch a, I'm just saying. That is exactly what Renee was doing to Diana. And if that has ever happened to you, drop a yes in the comments right now. Because you are not alone. This story is for you. For 2 days after Renee started talking, Diana noticed slightly fewer customers during the morning rush. Nothing dramatic. Just a few faces missing. She said nothing. She cooked the same amount. She waited. On the 3rd day, twice as many customers came as usual. The rumor had made people curious. And curiosity brought them directly to Sugar Crown to see for themselves. Renee had advertised Diana's bakery without meaning to. But Renee was not the type of person to learn from a mistake. She was the type of person who, when a plan failed, made a bigger plan. And what she did next, what she actually physically did, is the part of this story that made the whole town of Millfield go completely silent when they finally found out. On a Thursday morning in December, Diana stepped into her back room to answer her phone. It was her supplier about a flour order. She was gone for maybe 4 minutes. Renee had been watching through the shared wall. The bakery shared a ventilation system and a thin interior wall, and Renee had learned to listen for Diana's footsteps going into the back room. When she heard them, she moved. She came through the side entrance with a key she had gotten copied from the landlord under the pretense of a shared utility concern. She was in Diana's kitchen for less than 90 seconds. She opened one of the proofing drawers where Diana's croissant dough was resting. She did what she came to do. She left. Diana came back from the back room and went straight to her oven. She did not notice anything different. That morning, the first 3 customers who bought Diana's brown butter croissants said nothing for the first few bites. Then one of them, Melissa Park, who had been coming every week for 6 years, quietly put her croissant down. She looked at it. She looked at Diana. She said carefully. Does this taste different to you today? Diana came around the counter. She broke off a piece of Melissa's croissant. She tasted it. She stood there for a long moment. Then she went to the proofing drawer and looked at the dough. And she knew. She didn't say it out loud right away. She didn't accuse anyone in front of her customers. She just stood at that counter with a piece of tampered croissant in her hand and she knew. And that kind of knowing, the knowing that comes before you have any proof, the knowing that lives in your body before it reaches your brain, that is one of the loneliest feelings a person can have. Have you ever known something that you couldn't prove yet? Tell us in the comments. Because Diana was standing in that exact place. Diana pulled all the morning's remaining product. She told Tyler to put up a sign saying they were sold out. She comped every customer who was already in the bakery. She did all of this calmly and with a steady voice. And then she called the health department herself and reported a potential product contamination at her own bakery so it would be on record. Let that land. She reported herself. Not to protect herself from blame, but to create a documented record of exactly when the contamination happened, exactly what was affected, and exactly what she pulled. While she was on the phone with the health department, Tyler noticed Diana reach up and touch the recipe binder on the shelf. She didn't open it. She just touched the spine. Like she was steadying herself with something invisible. The health department came. They found nothing dangerous, whatever Renee had used was unpleasant but not harmful. Diana was cleared within 48 hours. She reopened the next morning. And the morning after that. But Renee was not finished. Not even close. Because what she was planning to do next, what she was building toward, was something that went far beyond spoiled dough and whisper campaigns. And the whole town of Millfield was about to find out exactly how far jealousy can go when it is left unchecked. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, the busiest morning of Diana's week, Renee walked into Sugar Crown with a woman none of Diana's customers recognized. The woman was carrying a notebook and a recording device. Renee stood at the counter and said loudly, loud enough for every customer in the bakery to hear. Diana, I think the community deserves to know what is actually going into these croissants. I've filed a complaint with the county health department about unlicensed ingredient sourcing and I've also contacted the local news station. This is Amy. She's a journalist. The bakery went absolutely silent. Tom Bradshaw put down his coffee. Melissa Park looked at Diana. Tyler, behind the counter, went completely still. Diana looked at Renee. She looked at Amy. She looked at Amy's recording device. And then she said, quietly and without any heat in her voice, Amy, welcome to Sugar Crown. Can I get you a coffee while we talk? That moment. Diana offering coffee to the journalist who had been brought in to expose her. That was the moment Millfield started paying attention. The county health inspection that followed was the most thorough Sugar Crown had ever had. Inspectors came twice in 1 week. They checked sourcing, storage, labeling, temperatures, handling, everything. Sugar Crown passed every single inspection. Perfectly. Not almost perfectly. Perfectly. The journalist, Amy, filed her story. It was about Diana. But not in the way Renee intended. The headline read, Millfield Bakery owner welcomes investigation, passes every check, community rallies behind Sugar Crown. The Saturday after the article ran, the line at Sugar Crown started forming at 5:30 a.m. Someone brought a folding chair. Renee's Bakery, sweet rival, closed its doors for the first time that same Saturday. Nobody came. Now here is what I need you to understand about Renee Carson at this point in the story. A reasonable person, after everything that had happened, after the sabotage, after the public accusation, after the investigation that cleared Diana completely and made Renee look like exactly what she was, a reasonable person would stop. They would reconsider. They would go home. But Renee Carson was not reasonable anymore. She was beyond reason. And what she did next, what she actually went out and arranged, crossed a line that no amount of jealousy can justify. Are you still with us? Because this is where the story turns. Renee found someone online. She was not thinking clearly anymore. She had not been sleeping. She had watched everything she planned either fail or backfire. And in that specific kind of exhausted irrational desperation, the kind that makes people do things they cannot explain afterward, she made a payment to a person who claimed they could make Diana unable to bake. We are not going to go into the details of what that means or what she believed it involved. What matters is this. The morning after Renee made that arrangement, she woke up and her hands were shaking uncontrollably. By the next morning, she could not grip anything. By the third day, she was in urgent care. The doctors found no medical explanation. They ran tests. They found nothing. They sent her to a specialist. The specialist found nothing. Renee knew what had happened. She had heard the person she paid say the words, "Whoever you're sending this at, if they're clean, it will come back." She had not believed it then. She believed it now. And here is the question that nobody in Millfield could stop asking when this all came out. What does it feel like to be the person who spent months trying to destroy someone with a clean heart, and then watch every single thing you sent come back and land on you instead? What does that feel like? We'll tell you what it looked like. It looked like Renee Carson showing up at Sugar Crown's back door at 11 p.m. on a Thursday night, alone, in the dark, knocking quietly. And Diana, who had every reason in the world to not open that door, opened it anyway. Renee stood in Diana's back doorway with her hands wrapped in bandages. She looked like someone who had not slept in a week. She looked smaller than she had ever looked. Diana looked at her for a long moment. She said, "Come in." They sat at the small prep table in the back kitchen. Renee talked for a long time. She told Diana everything. The copied key. The proofing drawer. What she had done to the dough. The journalist she had brought in. The person she had found online and what she had paid them to do. Diana listened to all of it without interrupting. When Renee finished, she said, "I know you have every right to call the police right now. I understand if you do. I just needed you to know the truth." Diana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Renee. I've known since the second week." Renee looked up. "I knew what you put in the dough. I knew about the key. I watched you do the thing with the journalist and I let it happen because I knew what was going to come out the other side. I reported myself to the health department before you even had a chance to file a complaint because I wanted a paper trail for when the truth caught up with you." She looked at Renee's bandaged hands. "What happened to you? I didn't arrange that. I didn't ask for it. I don't operate that way." She paused. "My father told me once, bake with a clean heart, D. The dough always knows. And if anyone comes for you while your hands are clean, what they send will find its way back to them. Every time." I thought he was being poetic. He wasn't. Diana reached across the table and gently placed her hand over Renee's bandaged ones. "I forgive you," she said. "Not because what you did was okay. It wasn't. But because I am not going to carry what you sent into my kitchen. It doesn't belong here. You cannot spoil what you do not understand. And you cannot steal what lives inside a person." Renee started crying. Not politely. The way people cry when they have been holding something for so long that when it finally releases, there is no grace left in it. Diana did not tell her to stop. She got up, made 2 cups of tea, and put one in front of Renee. "Drink that," she said. "And then go home and rest. Your hands will heal. Now." You might think that is where the story ends. And honestly, if this were a movie, that would be the last scene. But this is Millfield, Ohio. And in small towns, nothing happens in a back kitchen that stays there. By Friday morning, 3 people knew what had happened. By Saturday morning, everyone did. And what happened that Saturday at Sugar Crown, what the town of Millfield did, is the part of the story that Diana says she will never forget as long as she lives. That Saturday, the line at Sugar Crown started at 4:30 a.m. Diana arrived at 4 a.m. as always. She unlocked the back door. She tied her apron. She washed her hands. She put her hands flat on the cold steel counter and she stood there for 60 seconds. Greeting the kitchen. When she looked up, Tyler was already there. He had come in an hour early and didn't say why. He just put on his apron and started on prep. When Diana opened the front door at 8 a.m., there were 47 people in line. Not because of the article. Not because of social media. Because people had heard, the way people hear things in small towns, through phone calls and neighbor conversations and church hallways, that Diana Wells had sat with the person who tried to destroy her and given her a cup of tea and forgiven her. And Millfield, Ohio decided to respond. Tom Bradshaw was first in line at 4:30 a.m. He brought his own folding chair. When Diana saw him through the window and came to the door to tell him they didn't open until 8, he said, "I know when you open, D. I've been coming here for 9 years. I just wanted to be first today." Melissa Park brought her daughter, who had never been to Sugar Crown because Melissa always brought pastries home. The daughter was 14 and when she took her first bite of a brown butter croissant she looked at her mother with an expression that made Melissa laugh out loud. The Kowalski brothers came at 7 a.m. and stood in line and argued loudly and affectionately about everything as usual. The only difference was that when they got to the counter and Kevin Kowalski paid, he slid an extra 20 across to Tyler and said, "That's not for the order. That's just because." And here is what I want to ask you, because this moment matters. When someone in your life, someone who has been building something good, quietly, without making noise about it, gets attacked, what do you do? Do you get curious and investigate the rumor? Or do you show up? Because Millfield showed up. And if you have ever shown up for someone like this, or if someone has ever shown up for you, put it in the comments. We want to hear it. Because that is what this story is actually about. Renee Carson closed Sweet Rival the following Monday. She put a simple sign on the door, "Closed permanently. Thank you." She sold her equipment. She moved out of Millfield 3 weeks later. Diana heard she went to stay with her sister in Cincinnati. Nobody celebrated. There was no crowd watching her leave. There was no public shaming, no angry confrontation, no one recording anything on their phone. She just left. "My father worked in a grocery store bakery for 31 years, she said. He was never the head baker. He was never in charge. He worked the early morning shift before the store opened and he went home before most people arrived. Nobody knew his name." She looked at her hands. "He gave me a recipe binder when he was dying. And he told me, bake with a clean heart, D. The dough always knows." I thought he meant something mystical. I don't think that anymore. I think what he meant was simpler than that. If you show up with greed or anger or the need to take something from someone else, the food knows. If you show up clean, if you have nothing to hide and nothing to prove, the food knows that too. She looked at Amy. That is the recipe. It is the most ordinary secret in the world. And nobody believes it because everyone is looking for something more complicated. Amy wrote the article anyway. She wrote it as a personal essay, not a news story. The last paragraph read, "I was brought to Sugar Crown to find a scandal. What I found instead was a woman who had been quietly building something beautiful for 11 years, in a small town in Ohio, with flour and butter and a dead man's handwritten notes, and the extraordinary patience of someone who knows that what is built with a clean heart cannot be destroyed by dirty hands. The piece went everywhere. Food blogs. Local news stations. Eventually a national outlet picked it up. The Saturday after it ran, the line at Sugar Crown started forming at 3 a.m. Somebody brought a generator and a space heater. Diana arrived at 4 a.m. Same as always. She unlocked the back door. She tied the white apron with the coffee stain she had never managed to get out. She washed her hands. She put them flat on the cold steel counter and stood there for 60 seconds. Greeting the kitchen. And here is what I want to leave you with. Because this story is not really about croissants. It is about the specific experience of building something with your whole heart, slowly, quietly, without shortcuts, and then watching someone decide that your success is somehow a problem they need to solve. It is about what happens when jealousy stops being a feeling and becomes a plan. And it is about something Diana Wells said in an interview that nobody could stop thinking about afterward. The interviewer asked, "Do you have any regrets about how you handled it? Is there anything you would have done differently?" Diana thought about it. "I would have opened the door sooner," she said. "When Renee came to my back door that night, I would have had the tea already made." That is who Diana Wells is. Now before we go, I need to hear from you. Who in your life is Diana? Who do you know that has been building something quietly and beautifully while someone else tried to tear it down? Tell us their story in the comments. Even if it's just one sentence. And if this story hit you somewhere real, if you felt it, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because stories like Diana's deserve to travel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button. Because we have more stories like this coming. And you do not want to miss them.